All right, this is another episode of whatever the hell I'm doing. The Uncolored Podcast. Thanks for coming in. My name's Kevin Metcalf. Today, I wanted to go over just a couple of things. It's a concept that I've talked about before, but it always bears repeating. It's the concept of show your work. One of the things that I'm doing here is there's an idea that I'm trying to work out that I call the big idea. And the idea basically states that there's either an objective reality that the source of which is God. That means God exists. Doesn't matter where you believe it or not. It's not a religious idea, although, I think most people will see it as that. But it doesn't matter whether you believe it. It's either true or it isn't true. We've tricked ourselves today to thinking that that what we believe and what is true are the same things, sadly enough. We think that there's this circle of what is true and the circle of what we believe, and as a Venn diagram, rather than there just being an overlapping part, we think they're the same circle. So if I believe it, it must be true. That seems to how we understand reality. And it's kind of the dumbest way you can look at reality. I mean, if you just look at your own life, there are times where you knew something was true and it turned out to be false. So it seems obvious that, everything we believe just isn't true. Right? It seems like there's this basket of things we believe. I didn't even plan on talking about this, but this is where I am, so I should make notes. But there's this basket of things that we believe. It's a tiny basket, really. Then there is a basket called all true propositions. Everything that's true, okay? It's an infinitely big basket. All true propositions. We know just a small portion of the things that are true, okay? What we believe, again, what's in this basket, you'd hope a lot of the things in your basket are also contained in the basket, the infinitely big basket of all true propositions. But to think that everything in your basket of beliefs is everything would be found in the thing of all true beliefs, in that larger infinite basket, it's just a dumb idea. You just have to know. I shouldn't say you just have to. Maybe people don't know. It just seems obvious to me that there are some things that you believe that aren't true, which means you have work to do to try and figure out which are those things. Because if you believe all of them, it's likely that you don't know which ones are true and which are not true, because you think they're all true. But if what I just said is true, I'm confusing myself, then clearly some of the things you believe, it's likely that they aren't true. And so it seems like you would want to investigate and find out what are these things that are in my basket of things I believe that shouldn't be in that basket. Because I'd like to just believe the things that are true, at least to the degree that it is possible. And I don't think it's possible for all your beliefs to be true. I just don't think that's possible, although, I don't know, maybe it is. But the whole idea behind what I'm doing today is that I don't think most of us really care. We just like to believe what we believe because it supports our worldview. And the last thing that anybody wants to do is to have to confront challenges to our worldview. That was the last video cast that I did. I don't know what to call these things. On intellectual bigotry. Bigotry is the tactic of protecting my worldview from challenges by erecting just unleapable barriers. Unleapable barriers, I just made that up. Barriers that I would never subject my own ideas to. I'm going to hold your ideas to standards that I would never hold my own ideas to, so I can keep them out and keep them from challenging me. That's where racial bigotry comes in. That's where intellectual bigotry comes in. It's ideas that I don't like. I'm going to hold them to a standard that I would never hold my own ideas. And the reason we do that is because we just don't want to look in our basket to find out that some of the things we believe just aren't true. It's a scary thing. And I get it. But it makes us do all these crazy things. Well, one of the things that I suggest people do, I wanted to use a stronger word, but I couldn't think of one. Is it's a concept called show your work, and I've and I've said it before, but it bears repeating because in our world, if you're a Twitter person, and by the way, social media is just the worst place to find out what the world is really about. That's You can go there to find out what the dummies think about the world, but social media just isn't the place to find out what the real world is about. But I don't know why I even said that. I got off track. But there are things that are objectively true. But the question is, how do I know that? How can I look in this basket of beliefs that I have? And how do I find out which ones are true and which ones I need to discard or adjust or change? It's the only way that we can operate in such a way that we're operating in concert with reality. There's this terrain that we have to navigate called reality. And there are structures on this terrain. And the only way you can map out those structures properly is to have as many true beliefs as possible. True beliefs equal accurate structures of reality. I think that makes sense. Anyway, so how do you do that? Well, one process is a process that I advocate called show your work. And I've talked about it before, but when I was taking math classes back as a kid in high school, I hated math and I was terrible at it. And anytime I had a quiz or a test on something, I'd get it back and it's full of, it's bloody with red marker. And it always would say, show your work. Because half the time I'm guessing. You get a question and that seems to be the right answer and you put the right answer down because that might be the only point you get on the whole test, at least for me. And you would inevitably get, or at least I would inevitably get, the test saying, show your work. The point of it that Mr. Boone, poor old Mr. Boone, what he's trying to get you to understand, or me, was that it's not enough just to have answers. You have to understand, or it's more important to understand, what is the process for obtaining correct answers to questions. And there's a process. And if you know the process for obtaining correct answers, then even when I'm not in class and I'm confronted with some mathematical problem, I will know the process to get the correct answer. That was the whole point of math, not just to get me thrown out of class. But show your work is a concept that goes beyond mathematics. I have the unfortunate experience, and I'm sure most people do if you engage in these conversations, and I try not to as much as possible. I'm not out there trying to talk to people about these kinds of things, but, inevitably it happens. And I'm just not the person who, when somebody says something that's challengeable, I will challenge it. When somebody makes an assertion, I will always ask, well, what led you to that conclusion? Or if somebody says that this is true, I'm going to ask, well, if that's true, then how do you explain these things? Because those things conflict. How do you explain that? That's the process of challenging someone to show their work. Because there's a lot of folks today, and I run into a ton of them, who like to hide behind slogans, right? Black Lives Matter, believe all women, whatever it is. Slogans. They put them on their t-shirts. They walk around with signs with all of these slogans, social justice, critical race. And I guarantee you, 99% of the people who are holding those signs or saying those things have no clue what they mean. And it's not just folks on the left. I'm sure there are people on the right who have the same thing. It's a people thing. We believe things based on, they sound good to us. They affirm our worldview, so I don't have to take on any challenges, right? If I want to be accepted in this group of people, I have to believe these things. People in church do that all the time. People in any organization. If you're in work, you show up to work, and now you're in this training class of what is it? What do they do? What is it? The forced sensitivity training, right? Got to be more sensitive, like as if the world isn't too sensitive already. Now we got to be forced into being more sensitive. And at some point, we have to start asking people and challenging them, why should I believe what you're telling me? Because I guarantee you, most of the people who are coming into your work and giving these classes, they're not qualified to tell you these things. They're going on a script that somebody told them to teach you. And if you challenge them on any of it, if you just go beneath the barest surface of some of these slogans, they don't know. They have no clue where it came from. They don't know the genesis of it. They don't know the roots of it. But they're putting it forth like it's the right thing to do because it puts them in solid with their group by putting forth these stupid things. And unfortunately, oftentimes, your paycheck, your ability to go out and shop, your ability to engage in society is tied to you accepting these things. So most people who know they're bullshit go along with it. I was going to say full shit, but that's not a word. But even if people know these things are wrong, they go along with them because their paycheck is tied to them. Or they're not going to be part of their group. Or they're going to have to answer for why they're saying it's not true. And they don't know why they think it's not true. And so it's easier just to go along to get along. And while it may work for you, your children are going to have to deal with a world that is going to repeat a pattern that has happened all through the 20th century. Wars, people, you see China. Certain people don't want to believe what the government's telling them. They're in prison camps. And when I was a kid and I heard that this had went on in Germany, I'm thinking, how could a group of people mark them for extermination, and the rest of the world just invade that country and just stop it immediately? It went on for months, if not years, before it was stopped. And all the while Jews were being exterminated, people in neighboring countries on the other side of the planet were eating dinner, watching comedies, watching movies and TV. People are being exterminated. It's going on in China now. People are in prison camps. And we're sitting here watching waiting to see what's going on the next streaming on Netflix. So these things can happen when we stop challenging the ideas that are forced upon us through corporations that have all the money, through Hollywood media that has all the money and has all of the TV viewing screens, right? Through sports figures who have all the money. There's this elite system of people who are telling you what the world should be like and have absolutely no justification for it because it's been tried before. And all they're doing is putting new names on an old system that has never worked and has only brought death and destruction. Social justice is just Marxism. And they instead of using economics for shields, they use black people and gays and women. And those are the human shields that you cannot question. And then they move their Marxism behind them. And nobody questions it. So that's the idea of show your work. There's a reason why things are true. But you have to investigate those things. And if you stop asking questions, if you stop investigating your own ideas, understanding which ones you need to keep and which ones you need to throw away, or which ones you need to adjust, you're no different. You're no better than the people that you say are wrong. You're just as bad as they are. And I'll give you a quick example. So I just wrote this article. The last 3 articles, I don't know what to call them. I got this blog. It's uncoloredmedia.com. And I'm writing my ideas out, and it's a great suggestion. I was just thinking this stuff. But somebody goes, you ought to put up a blog and just start writing it down so you can think better. It helps you think, and it does. Such as whatever thinking that I do, such as it is. But there's a guy who I know. I wish I had his book. I don't know him, but I read his book. I watched some of his YouTube videos. He's a philosopher at Azusa Pacific. Brilliant guy. His name's Joshua Rasmussen. Brilliant guy. Nice kid. And so I had this idea about objective morality. And so I wrote what I thought about it in an email. I sent it to him. And this guy didn't know me from Adam. And sure enough, he had some stuff to do. But, in a week or so, he said, hey, I got it, but I'm busy. And then I'll email you back. And sure enough, the guy emailed me back. God bless you, Josh, if you ever look at this thing. But while he agreed with my premise, he showed me something that I wasn't thinking about. Because I believe that morality has to be sourced in God. But he also explained that there's this idea of Platonism, where you can also have objective values, although I don't think it works. But listen, I'm not smart enough to go up against Josh Rasmussen, so I'm going with him. But I have to investigate that now. My point is, you have to be okay being wrong. It has to be okay that you're wrong about some of the ideas that you have. You have to be okay with people challenging you and you challenging other people's ideas and hearing what they say, because it's likely that they understand something, or at least the possibility exists that they understand something or have some perspective that you just don't have. And having that perspective or having that bit of knowledge can help you now weed out some of those beliefs that are in your basket that just shouldn't be there, or at least adjust them so you can have a basket that has more true beliefs in them, which allows you to navigate this terrain called reality much better. You can make better decisions. So that's the whole idea of show your work. I don't want to get into it, so I'll start rambling again. But that's enough of that. Show your work. If somebody tells you something is true, you need to challenge them. And you should be able to understand what they're saying, right? Don't automatically say they're wrong. Understand what they're saying and how they came to that perspective. And then you need to go investigate. And then when you investigate it, you'll either come to the same conclusion or you'll know why they didn't come to the right conclusion. But to just sit there and go, well, you're one of them and I'm one of these and you're one of those, and that's usually what it goes. Oh, you must be one of those. And you dismiss it. That's arrogance and that's bigotry. That's intellectual bigotry. Somebody challenges your idea, and rather than engaging with the idea, you put them in a category that says, I don't have to deal with you. That's what a bigot does. You should challenge those ideas. All right, enough. I keep talking, but I should shut up now. All right. So the next thing I want to do is introduce you. If you don't know this person, you really ought to know this person. His name's Roger Scruton. And unfortunately, he's passed on, I believe. Let me make sure. He's died. He's a philosopher, an English philosopher that I didn't really encounter. Yeah, he just passed last year in 2020. I just encountered him when Dr. Jordan Peterson was doing his world tour. And he had a couple of conversations with Roger Scruton. And, I love philosophy, but I don't know anything about it. I'm such an idiot. It's like being back in geometry class half the time. So when I heard this guy talking and the ideas that I'm like, there's no way I can understand where he's coming from. Because when I'll read a book, I love people like Plantinga, William Lane Craig, Rasmussen, Phaser. But oftentimes I'll be reading one of their books, and if I'm lucky enough to understand 30% of it, and sometimes they'll write a book, a popular book, where even an idiot like me can understand it, and I can get maybe 60-70% of it understood. But inevitably I'll come to some word or concept like Platonism, and now I got to go do a whole 3 or 4 days of studying of what the hell Platonism is, so then I can come back and finish reading the book. And so when I saw Roger Scruton, I'm going, I don't know how many books I'm going to have to read so I can understand this guy. But fortunately, I was going through Amazon, and I regularly go through Amazon.com and get more books to read. I love to listen. If you're not reading and if you're not teaching your kids to read, I got to tell you, I was an idiot in school. I was a complete dolt all through high school, all through college. I dropped out of art school in college. That's how dumb I am. I'm an art school dropout. But the one thing I loved to do was I always loved to read, and I think that kept me, kept my intellectual fingers kind of just hanging on the edge of the game. Teach your kids to read. That's the best thing you can do, is to teach your kids to read as soon as possible. I don't know what that was for. That was a commercial for nobody. So I picked up a book by Roger Scruton called Fools, Frauds, and Firebrands. And the book is brilliant. He's a philosopher. He seems to be conservative. I don't know how the politics in Britain go, because I know they've got Tories and I don't know other stuff. They have a liberal. They even got a socialist party, I think. And I think he tends to be more conservative. At least that's what I get from his writing. But what I love about this book is there are people who are able to take ideas and just dissect them and then flay them. And there are things that I'll hear, like when I hear social justice and critical race theory, I automatically know it's wrong. I know it's bad. And I'll read some of the books about it and some of the articles about it, and I'm like, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. Excuse me. But there's a deeper understanding of it that I just don't have. And it's harder for me to get my brain around. Well, that's hard for me to get my brain around anything. But it's hard for me to get my mind around. But then I'll read a book like this, and it just, I go, okay, now I get it. That's why it's wrong. I knew it was wrong. I just couldn't put my finger on it. There's a book by Friedrich Hayek on socialism. It's called The Road to Serfdom. Same exact thing. Brilliant book. I mean, I know socialism is just a stupid idea, only because it's poisoned so many countries and civilizations in the past 100 years. Venezuela and Cuba being the latest. But I don't know why. I'm not an economist. But when you read Friedrich Hayek's book, he totally explains it. And he wrote this, I don't know, 70, 80 years ago. This is another book like this. And I'm just going to read you a couple of things, because he so connects the social justice, all these feminist movements, and shows you how they're nothing more than Marxism, Hegelian ideas, just warmed over it. They're always the same ideas. And they just rehash them again when they don't work. When they don't work here, they find another civilization and start naming people and pitting people against each other, and then trying to drive a wedge between each other. That's what's currently going on here in America. So he's talking about how Marxism, how it began and its roots. This is the first, and this is just the first chapter. He's brilliant. He says the enemy was no longer described as before, talking about how they name people. Marxism names the different groups they want to pit against each other. It says the Marxist reading. The Marxist template did not easily fit the new conditions, and it seemed a trifle foolish to champion the cause of the working class when its last members were joining the ranks of the unemployable or the self-employed. And what he's saying is, when Marx first had his idea was that it was going to be an economic thing. He thought that the capitalists, the people who had the money, they were the capitalists, and the people who didn't have money were the proletariat. There's the bourgeois and the proletariat. Those are the working class people. And his idea that capitalism wasn't going to work, was going to crumble, and then the working class would just, take over the government using violence. Just so you know, Marxism entails a violent overthrow every single time. So anybody who's talking social justice, they're talking about a violent overthrow of the government. It's the only way it can happen. But back then, Marxist was people who don't have money to people who have money. Well, the problem was capitalism works. And more people who did not have money were starting to have money. More and more people who didn't have things were starting to have more and more of the, the common, what are the things, that everybody has? Radios, the common comforts of society, radios, heaters, those kinds of things. So more and more people, as he's saying here, became self-employed, starting their own businesses, or they were just unemployable. For one reason or another, they just wouldn't have been employable in any system. But as that, began to separate, Marxism failed, and the countries just died. That's how the Soviet Union crumbled. They didn't have any money. Marxism never works. Top-down economies never work. The righteous distributing goods and services to everybody else never works. Look at Venezuela, the place that they'll never talk about. Or if they do talk about it, they'll go, it wasn't socialism that did it, it was the capitalists who screwed it up again. Because socialism, while it never works, never doesn't work, somehow, in their minds. But it's a beautiful way to understand it. Here's another one. Leftists believe, with the Jacobins of the French Revolution, leftists believes with the Jacobins of the French Revolution that the goods of this world are unjustly distributed, and that the fault lies not in human nature, but in the usurpations practiced by a dominant class. They define themselves in opposition to established power, the champions of a new order that will rectify the ancient grievance of the oppressed. And so that's what it always is. And he goes on to say 2 attributes of the new order justify the pursuit of it: liberation and social justice. And what he's saying is that no matter what the divisions they want to make, it's always there's this one group of people that are holding down the other people. Or in other words, Shelby Steele explains it better. When they use race, what they want you to believe is that any problem a black person has can be explained by race and only race. So if a black person can't read, it's not that they never went to school or are hanging out behind the liquor store or doing drugs or doing crimes. No, that can't be it. It's the establishment. It's the white power structure. It's the school. It's something else, right? If black folks are in jail, it's not because they're out committing crimes more than anybody. It's not that half of the murders committed in America are committed by black folks. That can't be the reason. No, it's some, oppressor-oppressed paradigm. Everything is understood by that. And what leftists do to get power through this social justice thing is to say, we're going to help the victims. But the problem is you always got to pick new victims. Because the people who are supposedly victims, pretty soon you start to figure out they're not really victims. A lot of the problems they're having are kind of their own fault, or at least their own decision. Right? You remember that 70%, the women not making as much as men. And when you do the analysis, you find out that women are making different decisions than men. They're having babies. They're not having as long careers. And when women do the exact same thing that men do, have the same kind of career, don't have children, not only do they make as much as men, they make more money than men. Same thing happens in the black community, right? All the disparities that you see in the black community don't happen when blacks have 2 parents in the home, when blacks have the same education as comparable to whites. When you compare apples to apples, black folks not only do the same as white people, they do better than white people. When they have two families. When they have sometimes 2 families. When they have 2 parents, college educated, make just as much money as white folks, and oftentimes more. When does it happen? When did the separation happen? When black folks hold on to the far left Government's going to save me. Government's going to be my daddy. Government's going to pay my bills. Government's going to fix the world for me. I'm not going to have a father in the home. I'm going to take that welfare, right? I'm not going to take my kid to a private school. I'm going to take it to the public school where they're teaching my kids Marxism and what victims they are. That's when you start to find all those disparities. That's when blacks start falling behind, when they don't have a father in the home. But you'll never hear that. It's always got to be somebody else. Because if you're the source of your problems, then you don't need nobody else to fix them. You just need to fix yourself. But nobody gets elected by that, right? You're not going to elect anybody who says, hey, actually the problem's you. And if you stop being such an asshole, you'd have all the things everybody else has. Nobody's going to elect that person. So you only get politicians, and especially with black folks, who will promise them that their problems have nothing to do with listen, you're making all the right decisions. Continue to put forth that vile rap music that talks about murder, mayhem, the subjugation of women, jail time, that glorifies all that, drugs. Just keep putting that music out there. That's not your problem. We'll fix it. It's white people. No, it's not your problem that you don't have a man in the home to teach your son justice. Because that's the role of a father in a home. The role of a father in the home is to teach the kids justice. That's what the father's for. You know, I told a story. I'm going on longer than I should, but what the hell? You know, when I was a kid, probably 6 or 7, I was a big comic nerd because my oldest brother, God rest his soul, got me into comic books. And I would draw my own comics. I'd draw my own heroes and stuff like that. Loved to draw. Was terrible at it, 7, 8 years old, young kid. But I'll never forget this one time I drew a picture on a piece of, just scratch paper, any paper I could find. And I drew a picture for my dad of a suit. Because my dad at the time worked at Lockheed in Santa Clara. And he was an executive, and he had, he'd always wear these, tailor-made suits. He was a big clothes hound. So I drew a suit and was proud of it and showed it to my mom and my dad. And it had problems. It wasn't the best looking suit, but what the hell, I was just starting out. Guess what the reaction was? Mom loved it. Oh, baby, it's the best thing in the world. Love it. Oh, you're so wonderful. What a great picture, right? Because that's the mom's role. The mom's role is to emulate God's unconditional love. That's what moms are for. Unconditional love. I don't care what you do, we love you. Even if you draw a crappy suit for your dad. Dad's role is different. When I showed the picture to my dad, he goes, "What is this?" He goes, "That's not what a suit looks like. You got the arms too long. One's longer than the other. The legs are all crooked, right? He just started he just started picking it apart. He goes, "That's not right." He goes, "Go back and do it again." Right? Now, if anybody out there is going, "Boy, what a horrible dad," you're wrong. That's love. That's my father showing me love. It's not the unconditional, I don't care what you do love. It's the love that says, "Son, I love you," but out in the world, there's a different standard. And you gotta be better. You gotta be able to meet that standard. So go out and try it again and come back. That's what fathers are for. Fathers are there to tell you that you have to be the best you can be to be successful out there in the world. And everybody's not going to accept you like your mother. That's what dads are for. Mothers and fathers are in the home to emulate the love of God, the unconditional love, but also the justice and the judgment, because both are love. Any parent who loves their kids will judge them. When they do wrong, you've got to correct that. That's judgment. Any parent that does not correct their kids, you're not showing them love. You're not treating them properly. They need that. And that's what parents are for. But if you go with the left, the idea of the left is you don't need a father in the home. Women can do it all. And after 70 years of black men, black women growing up without the father in the home to teach them justice. You have a whole generation of people who've grown up thinking that every single thing they do should be accepted. And there should be absolutely no criticism of what they do. And now, racism no longer means I hate you. Racism now means I'm critical of something that you're doing, and that criticism may be valid. But nobody cares. Because we've raised a whole generation, 2 generations now, of men and women who think whatever they do should never be criticized. Unconditional love. And if anybody criticizes you for anything, they're a racist, sexist, homophobe, and on and on and on and on and on. And right behind that moves in the Marxist ideology that anything that you do is great, and if anybody criticizes you, they're the oppressor. And if you vote me in office, we're going to fix it for you. That's the left today. I could go on. There's more stuff I wanted to read in here, but I've already yammered for far too long. Well, I'll go one more. So here he goes on, it says, and this is just in the first chapter, it says, likewise, the goal of social justice is no longer equality before the law, right? Or the claim to the rights of citizenship, as these were advocated in the Enlightenment. The goal is a comprehensive rearrangement of society so that privileges, hierarchies, and even the unequal distribution of goods are either overcome or challenged. The more radical egalitarianism of the 19th century Marxists and anarchists who sought for the abolition of private property perhaps no longer has the widespread appeal. I got a tough time reading, folks. I have a tough time reading. But the goal of social justice, there marches another and more dogged egalitarian mentality, which believes that inequality in whatever sphere, poverty, leisure, legal privileges, social rank, education, opportunities, or whatever else we might wish for ourselves and our children, is unjust until proven otherwise. In every sphere in which the social position of the individuals might be compared, equality is the default position. So any place, anytime, one group of people doesn't have the exact same thing that the other group of people have, it's automatically wrong, right? Again, doesn't matter that you never studied in school, doesn't matter that you were getting drunk all the time, doesn't matter that you were committing crimes, that doesn't matter. You should have the same thing that everybody else has, and if you don't, it's got to be some injustice. It's all nonsense. And it's all nonsense from 100 years ago. It failed then. It will fail again because it always fails everywhere it's implemented. But because they've packaged it in new terminology, critical race theory, forced sensitivity training, right? They put it all in these new packages. And because, as I said before, because we never challenged them, we never asked them to show your work. We never challenged them on where their ideas came from, because we oftentimes don't know ourselves. They just continue to force it on us through the media, through the corporations, through government. And we never ask why. So, show your work is a great concept. You should practice it all the time, all day, every day. And you should get this book by Roger Scruton. Let me give you the title again. I closed the thing before I was able to give you the title. Hopefully it'll come up here. But it's a great book, and it's eminently readable. If I can read it, anybody can read it. It's called Fools, Frauds, and Firebrands. That's the name of the book. And as I said, if I can read it, anybody can read it. So, all right, that's enough. I'm out of here.